dedicate 1 minute to introduce our lecturer. We're here with Dr. Noa Elbelda. She's a lecturer at the Sagol Center of Brain and Mind at the Reichman University. The topic of the lecture is resilience in crisis and neuroscience perspective. I can tell you that usually I know that Noa is very busy, and since the beginning of this war, she's been even busier than usual. So we really appreciate the time you are dedicating to us. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I'm happy to be with you, even if it's remotely. And indeed, since the war with Hamas started, my services have been in high demand because I work at an educational center which develops tools to build resilience and stress management and emotional regulation. And as you can imagine, these capabilities are very important. They're always important, but they have become more important in the past few years because we have indeed been exposed to many extreme situations, one after the other. And we started with the COVID-19, and then we had here the legal reform, I should say struggle, and now we have this war with Hamas. And I'm praying that we don't have, I don't know, maybe a natural disaster coming next or something. I hope not. Like they say, bad things come in triplets. So I hope this is it, okay? Now, I apologize, but this is a multi-cat household. I have 4 cats. One of them is sleeping, which is what she does most of the day. But I have 2 more cats which are very hyperactive. And for some reason, they've decided to run around the house like crazy. So if you hear all kinds of noises behind me, it's just the cats going crazy. I assume they will settle down soon and also go to sleep.
As long as it's not another catastrophe.
Sorry?
As long as it's not another catastrophe.
No, happily, they are very well-behaved cats. They just like to run around a lot, and they mostly don't do any damage to the house. So I will just say that this lecture is recorded for the benefit of those that couldn't join. And I will send Jonathan the link to the recording. It will be available, I think in the Zoom, it is saved for about, I'm not sure if it's 10 days or 30 days, but it will be available for some time. And I will also download it to my computer so that it will last longer. So Jonathan, maybe I will send you a link to Google Drive with the lecture so that it's there permanently. And you are most welcome to take this link and pass it on. I have the same parallel lecture in Hebrew already on YouTube, and now it will be also in English. So again, feel free to pass it on to your families, friends, whoever you think it will interest. Okay?
Thank
you. So we will go ahead and start. I'm going to share my presentation. Now, I plan to talk for about maybe a little bit over an hour. And then in the time we have left, I will be happy to answer any questions that you have. But because we are quite a small group, then usually when I lecture to big groups, I ask not to ask while I'm talking, to keep the questions to the end. But because we are quite a small and intimate group, which is actually kind of nice, so, you know, as I'm talking, if you have any questions, you can either write them in the chat or just open your microphone and ask them, or you can raise your hand and then I will let you speak, okay? Can you see the presentation, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the topic of my talk is indeed resilience in crisis, a neuroscience perspective. But before we start the talk, I wanted to tell you a little bit, a really tiny little bit about myself, but mostly about the Sagol Center for Brain and Mind, where I work. So I'm a neuroscientist. I have a PhD in neuroscience from the Tel Aviv University. And when I finished my PhD, I actually understood that I did not want to continue with like a classical academic career, which is go abroad, do a postdoc or two, and then hope that something opens up here in Israel at one of the universities, and you can come back and become like a full professor. I love science. I live in science. I think science can give us answers and solutions to many, many problems. But I realized that I wanted to stay in the field of neuroscience, but to do something more practical in the sense that I take the knowledge from neuroscience and I bring it out of the academia and onto the general public. And that's how I came to work at the Sagol Center for Brain and Mind at the Reichman University in Herzliya. And Sagol Center for Brain and Mind does three main things. The first thing is brain research. We have a laboratory, and we have people coming to the laboratory, and we connect them to all kinds of instruments that monitor their brain activity. We work with the EEG, as you can see here in the picture, but also with MRI, fMRI, and other technological tools. And we study the connection between the function of the human brain and human behavior and psychology. And we are focusing on all kinds of methods for mental training or brain training that give us resilience. And our main focus is mindfulness, which I assume that at least some of you have heard that word because it's become very trendy. Mindfulness is a brain training, is a group of brain training exercises based on Buddhist meditation. It has become very popular in the past few decades. And there is a lot of neuroscience around the practice of mindfulness showing that indeed when you practice it on a regular basis, of course, it can strengthen the neural networks that support resilience and emotion regulation and attention regulation and other very important qualities. And we are trying to understand like the neuroscientific basis, like what is it exactly in this exercise that influences the brain in that way. Apart from brain research, we have a lot of activity in the community. We have an educational branch, which is where I work now. And our educational branch is called the Purple School Program. It's an intervention program for teachers. We work with teachers, not with the pupils. And in this intervention, we combine three areas of knowledge. One is neuroscience, the other one is the practice of mindfulness, and the third one is what is called social emotional learning, which is, again, a group of practices aimed at developing the emotional and the social the emotional and social competency of both teachers and pupils. And we work all over Israel from K to 12. We work with the Jewish populations, Arab populations. We work in special education. It's a very sort of a universal program. And I am, as I said, this is where I work today. And my job in the Purple School Program is, first of all, to bring the knowledge from neuroscience into the schools and think together with the teacher, what is the meaning of this knowledge? So if I understand how the brain works and how the brain develops, what does it say about my practices as a teacher? What practices should I employ to support brain development? And my other job in the Purple School Program is I'm part of the research and evaluation team, because we have a lot of research around this program to make sure that it is that it has an impact. The third thing we do is just broad science communication, like I'm doing now. So I give a lot of courses and lectures, both to the general public, but also to people from mental health professions. We now have a program for doctors since the war started, doctors, nurses, medical staff, because we know they are under a lot of stress. So we, as I said, it's very important for us to take the knowledge about the brain and the connection between brain, mind, body, and make sure that it gets to outside of the academia. So that's us. If you want to read more about us, you can just look us up on Google, either תוכנית בית ספר סגול, or מרכז סגול למוח ותודעה, or in English, the Purple School Program, or the Sagol Center for Brain and Mind. And we have websites, we have Facebook pages, we have YouTube channels, so you're welcome to visit us. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about me, but mostly about the Sagol Center, we can go ahead and start. And I want to start with a little check-in exercise, which is called What is Happening to Me Now? And when I say now, I mean what is happening to me as of the 7th of October, which is now called the Black Saturday. So what you will see are about 7 sentences, which I will bring up one after the other. And what I would like for you to do, if this is comfortable for you, is to write in the chat, how well does this sentence relate to you? So if you agree that this sentence describes you in a good way, then you write 10. If this sentence doesn't describe you at all, then you write 0, or any number between 0 and 10. And again, the focus here is not about you in general, but about you since the 7th of October, okay? So I'm going to start presenting the sentences. And the first sentence is, I find it hard to do things that usually cause me joy, like my hobbies, okay? Now, probably this has changed because the 7th of October was already about 2 months ago. And unfortunately, we have grown, I think, a little bit accustomed to this crazy situation. So, you know, like בממוצע, on average, since the 7th of October, do you find it hard to do things that usually cause you joy? Okay, so if you agree with this sentence about you, then it's 10. If you disagree, then it's 0, or any number in between, according to how you feel. Okay, the next sentence, I'm experiencing a sense of restlessness and unease. Okay, next sentence, I have thoughts of fear or anxiety that are hard to stop. Okay. I haven't been sleeping well. My mind interprets everyday situations as dangerous. For example, when I hear a plane or a car passing by, or when someone unfamiliar knocks on the door, or when I hear a motorcycle. Okay, I'm constantly worried about my family and friends. And the last sentence, I miss the regular routine of life. Okay, so first of all, thank you for sharing. And I want to tell you, of course, this is not a scientific study, but I have been doing this exercise for many weeks now. My first lecture about resilience actually took place maybe 3 or 4 days after this whole situation started. And since then, I gave this lecture many, many times. And it's interesting for me to see that in the beginning, like in the first 2 or 3 weeks, people were writing like 9, 10, 9, 10, 9, 10 about almost all the sentences. And slowly, this has been changing. And now we see a more sort of even distribution in the answers. And this is interesting because it shows us how resilient we are. So we are still living in this very crazy situation, but we somehow have learned to cope in this situation. And in the beginning, we had very strong and extreme emotions and reactions, and these are slowly getting normalized. I suppose none of us are really back to normal, but the body can maintain a stress response only for so long, and eventually it passes. We will talk about it, but it's interesting to see how people are a little bit getting used to this, let's call it emergency routine. So we have exchanged the normal routine for a new routine, which is an emergency routine, but we've learned to cope with it. The other interesting thing, though, is that for sentences 6 and 7, most people still give high numbers. So a lot of people are very worried about family and friends, and most people also miss the regular routine of life. So I want to say that everything that we are experiencing since the 7th of October is normal. These are normal reactions to an abnormal situation. And we will presently talk about the stress response, and you will see that a lot of the things that I'm going to show you now are related to the stress response. I've been talking to a lot of people in the past few weeks and just sort of asking them to tell me how they feel, what thoughts are they having, what do they feel in their body. And I've made sort of a list of all the things that people have been telling me, and also things that I've experienced, of course, on myself. So if we think about the area of body and sensations, people have been experiencing fatigue on the one hand, but on the other hand, also restlessness and unease. We see a lot of really physical symptoms, like people talk about headaches, even nausea, weakness, lack or excess of appetite. Sometimes people tell me they feel sort of a feeling of disconnect and apathy, and distractedness. Very hard to focus, very hard to manage our attention. In the realm of thoughts and emotions, people have been talking about negative thoughts. And the extreme end of the negative thoughts is what we call catastrophizing, which are thoughts sort of like apocalyptic thoughts, in the sense that, okay, this is it, the state of Israel is not gonna make it, our time is up, we're never gonna be able to live here in peace again, and so on and so forth. So like the worst scenarios possible. So some people have been having these thoughts. Of course, in the emotional field, worry, fear, and anxiety. Many people feel frustrated because of the situation. They feel despair, they feel anger, they feel guilt. A lot of people have been telling me that they feel guilty, either from the perspective of what we call survivor's guilt, that they are safe while other people have undergone such terrible experiences, but also guilt because they feel they are not doing enough. They are not volunteering enough, they are not helping enough. So people talk about that. And also a feeling of helplessness, that there's nothing we can do to change this reality. In the realm of behavior, people have been suffering from difficulty working, difficulty maintaining a routine, difficulty engaging in enjoyable activities, irritability, excessive screen time. People are watching a lot of news and spending a lot of time on social networks recently. And also lack of motivation, okay? So it's hard to get up in the morning. It's hard to do like my chores either at home or at work. And all these responses, as I said, they are normal responses to an abnormal situation, and they are part of the way that our brain deals with stress and uncertainty. However, I do want to stress that, of course, during this time, a lot of us have had positive emotions and happy thoughts and you know, and well-adjusted behavior. And that is also fine, because I talked about guilt. I find that many people tell me that during these past 2 months, if they sort of catch themselves enjoying something or feeling happy, they feel that they are not okay. It's not okay for me now to be happy. It's not okay now for me to do something fun while people are suffering. And that is not true. It's very important, I would say maybe especially important in these very difficult times, to find the moments, yes, to feel happy, to have some fun. I will talk about it in the end. So like this is, I painted here a very negative picture, but of course that you know, after life does go on, even in the hardest of circumstances. So of course we also have positive emotions, positive thoughts, and so on and so forth. So let's talk about the human brain a little bit, and specifically I want to concentrate on the human brain and uncertainty. So this is our brain. It is made up of billions of brain cells, neurons, and trillions of synapses, which are the connections between the neurons that enable them to communicate with one another. And we know today that the brain, by producing electrical activity and chemical activity, actually generates our behavior and our psychological world. So our thoughts, our memories, our personality, of course, our emotions, our senses. So everything that we can do as humans is produced and controlled by the brain. And we as humans, we have, of course, very advanced cognitive and emotional abilities because we have a very developed prefrontal cortex. The frontal part of our brain is very big, much bigger when we compare ourselves to other animals. And this part of the brain is very important for highly complex activities like social relationships, high cognitive functions like the ability to think ahead and plan ahead, to make decisions based on past knowledge, to differentiate between good and evil, right and wrong, and so on and so forth. So this is a very complex and, in my eyes, wonderful machine or organ. And because of its complexity, it makes us very complex creatures, physically, emotionally, cognitively. But at the end of the day, despite our wonderful and very advanced brain, we have to remember that the brain has one important function, and this is survival. Okay, so the brain is mostly busy with how to make sure that we make it through another day successfully. And in order for us to survive, we need to be able to do two basic things. One is to recognize and be aware of things that are dangerous. And the other is to recognize things that do us good. And when we recognize that something is dangerous, we need to react accordingly. It's either fight or flight. We'll talk about it. And when we recognize something that is good for us, or at least that our brain thinks that is good for us, then we need to approach it and make sure that we get it, okay? Now, in order for the brain to help us survive, the brain is always trying to find certainty. And we know today that we have whole brain networks that are dedicated to what we call creating predictions about the future. Okay, so we have literally brain areas whose job is to think about the future and try to imagine what the future will bring. And of course, we do this based on past experiences, based on our knowledge about ourselves and about the world, based on our expectations, based on the upbringing that we've had, and based on many other things. But as I said, the brain is very busy with trying to answer the question, what is going to happen? You know, there's a song, famous song called Que Sera Sera.
Yeah.
So the brain is like this little girl in the song who keeps asking her mother and then her spouse, what will be, what will be, what will be? And the mother says, you know, what will be, will be. We don't have any control about it. So the brain is kind of like that. It's always asking what is going to happen, either in 5 minutes, in 2 hours, in a week, in a month, or in 20 years, okay? Now, of course, this is very supportive of survival, because if the brain is able to predict precisely, or not precisely, of course, none of us can do that, but if the brain is able to predict in sort of a good way, in general lines, what is going to happen, of course, we can prepare ourselves for the future. We can prepare ourselves for future challenges and make plans how to deal with these challenges. And this is why the human brain loves certainty. And this is why, for us, psychologically, a situation of uncertainty is very uncomfortable and even makes us very anxious. We as human beings, most of us, not all of us, but most of us, don't like uncertainty. We like to try to control everything. We like to know what's going to happen so that we can prepare. And again, this is sitting on this very important mechanism of survival. Now, what happens when there is uncertainty? Because what can we do? We live in a very dynamic world, in a world that is changing very fast. And in recent decades, the rate of these changes is just going up and up and up, mostly because of new technologies like the internet and cellular phones and so on. So we live in a world that is changing rapidly. It's very hard for us to predict well what is going to happen. And here in Israel specifically, because we live in an area which is war afflicted, and we have a lot of conflicts here, it is more extreme. And when we are faced with this uncertainty, the brain interprets uncertainty as danger. And when there is danger, it's time to activate the stress response, okay? So what you see here in this very general diagram is the anatomy of what we call the stress axis. Like the scientific name is the HPA axis, but I will call it the stress axis. And this is a system that connects the brain to the adrenal gland, which is sitting right on top of our kidneys. This is why in Hebrew it's called balutat yoteret hakilya, because it's sitting on top of the kidneys. And this, once the stress axis is activated, because our brain recognizes that there is some kind of danger, this axis is activated. And at the end of a long process, the adrenal gland starts secreting our two main stress hormones, which is adrenaline and cortisol. And adrenaline and cortisol will cause a full stress response in the body. Now, the stress response is a very important survival response because it improves our coping with a threatening situation, especially when this situation is acute. So the danger is here now and I have to deal with it presently. The stress response will make sure that my reactions will be quicker, better, my muscles will work faster, there will be a lot of oxygen flowing to my brain so that I can think clearly about how to act, and so on and so forth. So basically, the stress response is a good response. And again, when we're talking about acute stress, then the stress response improves our behavior, improves our abilities, and even gives a boost to our immune system, okay? Now, the stress response manifests in physical and emotional and behavioral and cognitive changes. And all these changes elicit usually an unpleasant physical state, okay? We don't like to be stressed because it's unpleasant in our body. And this unpleasantness in the body brings up unpleasant emotions and unpleasant thoughts. And that's why most of us don't like to be stressed. But again, I want to emphasize this is a very important response. And although a lot of times when we are stressed, we feel out of control and we feel sort of a feeling of like chaos, the stress response is a very organized biological response. So the body is not in chaos. The body is actually performing a series of very highly choreographed actions, but at the psychological level, we experience it a lot of times as losing control or feeling like we are in chaos. And I want to say that here, the body is sort of a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, stress is unpleasant because the body starts creating all kinds of unpleasant sensations, like my stomach is turning and my muscles, maybe they will start shaking a little bit, and my mouth becomes dry. So this is not pleasant, okay? So in this situation, the body is not a nice place to be in. However, I can use the body to regulate my stress. And we know today that there are a lot of techniques for stress reduction, which are focused on the body, like breathing exercises, exercises like different techniques of muscle relaxation. And what is this actually doing? This is causing the body to relax. And when the body relaxes, it sort of signals to the brain that everything is okay. And then the brain can relax as well, and the stress response actually goes down. So here the body plays a very important part in emotional regulation. The body can take us out of regulation, but it can also help us go back to being emotionally regulated. Now, the problem actually begins not with the acute stress response. The problem begins when the stress becomes chronic. So I'm having stress responses not only because there is something now threatening me and I have to deal with it, but the stress keeps on going even if I'm in an objectively safe environment. And I want to tell you that us as humans, we are very sensitive to the effects of stress. And there is an excellent book, which I highly recommend, which is called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. This book was written by Professor Robert Sapolsky, who is a neuroscientist. He's been working at Stanford for many, many years. And Robert Sapolsky is a world-renowned expert on stress and its effects. And he has written a book that it's a popular book. It's not a scientific book, it's a popular book. And this book talks about the stress response and its importance, but also the harm that it can do to us. And he tells there a story that if you look at zebras that live in the wild, zebras almost never suffer from illnesses that are related to high levels of stress. So I'm talking here about heart attacks and high blood pressure and diabetes and strokes and all those unpleasant things which are related to exposure to stress. You don't see that in zebras. You don't see also ulcers in zebras. Now we know that ulcers are caused by a germ, but we know that people that suffer from stress, the risk of developing this ulcer, if the germ is inside our body, goes up. Now, this is kind of interesting because if you think about it, zebras have a lot of stress in their lives because at any given moment, a lion or a lioness can start chasing them, trying to eat them. So when this happens, of course, the zebra is in terrible stress and she has a very high acute stress response. But if the chase is over and the zebra is still alive, the zebra knows to do a very important thing that us as humans, we find very difficult. She knows to let it go. What do I mean? I mean, once the chase is over and the zebra has escaped and the danger is no longer there, it will take her a very short time to go back to normal. So the stress response will dissipate quite clearly. And that's it, it's finished. And the zebra can go on with her life. So she had the acute stress response, but once the danger is over, this is finished. We find it very hard, again, because of our highly developed brains, because we cannot let go of things that stress us. And even after the stressor is gone, let's say there was a danger, but the danger is now over, we keep on thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And by this, we are actually causing like a snowball effect in which we are sort of maintaining the stress response because of our thoughts, even when the stressor is not there anymore. And this sort of switches us from acute stress to chronic stress. Okay, so something happened, it stressed me out, and now I can think about it for days and maintain high levels of stress, even though the stress is not justified because I'm not in any danger. And if you think about it, like maybe it happened to you, it happens to me a lot. I go on vacation and I'm on holiday and I might be, lying on a beach somewhere on a beautiful tropical island and everything is good and everything is well and I'm enjoying it. And then a thought pops into my brain and I think about something at work which is bothering me. Very quickly, my body is still on that beautiful tropical beach, but my mind is back here in Israel at work and I'm starting to worry about it. And very quickly, I'm going into stress, even though I'm not in any danger, even though I'm thinking about the future. This isn't even something that has happened. But because our brains like the certainty, the brain likes to think ahead and plan ahead, and it likes to think about things that bother us. And this is why we are so sensitive to stress. Okay. So what are we going to do about it? We don't have to be enslaved to the tendencies of our brains to think about stuff that worries us. And we don't have to be enslaved to the stress response. We can learn to manage it. Now, I want to say outright, there is no such thing as life without stress. I have never met a person who hasn't had any stress in his life. And I can promise you that even the Dalai Lama, which does meditation every day, he still has stress. I don't have to guess because he talks about it, okay? So, stress is part of the human experience. Stress is part of human life, and it's a natural and healthy part of our life because in many cases, stress, again, it makes us respond in a good way to situations. It makes us react better. A lot of people tell me that, as long as the stress is not too high, it even enhances their performance. And in many cases, that's true. But it can also be detrimental. Again, if we are in chronic stress, if we are unable to regulate the stress, then this can harm us. But the good news is that there are a lot of ways to regulate stress, and there are a lot of things that we can do to bring stress levels down. Again, not to make the stress disappear, but to be able to manage it and not let the stress manage us. Okay, so we are now asking the question, what can help us with this? And here we go to the world of building resilience. Okay, so what is resilience? I like to give two sort of dictionary definitions of resilience. The first one I'm reading from the slide: a mental, psychological, and physical state that enables us to cope with challenges, difficulties, or crises in a stable and optimal way. The second, a sense that we have sufficient resources to meet the demands of reality and to develop additional resources if necessary. So as part of the stress, I can learn, I can grow, I can develop. Okay, so these are the accepted definitions for resilience. I like to use a metaphor which we call to expand the container. Okay, now think about a container and it has a certain capacity, and now I start to fill this container with water, and I'm pouring water in, and the water level goes up and up and up and up, and eventually the container will be full to like 100% capacity, and then if I keep on pouring water, the water will flood. We as humans also have a container. This is, we call it our inner container, מכל הפנימי. And this is our ability to deal with pain, with challenge, with difficulty. Okay, so you can imagine that we have sort of this inner container, and this container can hold only so much trouble. And once this container overfills, then we are also flooded. We are flooded emotionally and physically and so on. And when we build resilience, we actually expand this container. So we teach ourselves to be able to deal better with all the difficult things in our lives, and we stay grounded and we stay stable and well-regulated. Now, I want to show you a model. This is a model used a lot in psychotherapy, and it's called the window of tolerance. And this model shows us the area of resilience and what happens when we are outside of that area. So if we look at the middle part where it says window of tolerance, this is a place of resilience. In this place, we are at an optimal arousal state. So we are aroused and lively, but not too much, also not too little. And we can carry on with our daily lives. And if we imagine ourselves as like this little boat floating down the stream, then we are floating down the river of well-being, and it's smooth sailing and everything is okay. And even if we have a little bit of difficulties, no problem, we can navigate them in a good way. Now, let's imagine, we don't have to imagine, we've been living it, that something happens, okay? There's a war with Hamas, there's missiles falling on our head, the Hezbollah in the north is also making threatening suggestions and so on and so forth. And now the challenges in our lives are going up and up and up, and accordingly the stress levels go up and up and up. Eventually, if I will not regulate myself, I will go out of the window of tolerance, and I can go out of this window of tolerance into two opposite directions. The first direction is what is called hyperarousal. And this is what we call the fight or flight response. In the stress response, there is a section of fight or flight. So this is sort of an active coping, but it's not very helpful because people, when they are in hyperarousal, they feel emotionally overwhelmed, they feel panicky, they feel unsafe. Sometimes it can manifest itself as being angry and even aggressive. You have racing thoughts, you have anxiety. It's a very unpleasant situation to be in, and this is the fight or flight. The other place where I can go to when I go out of the window of tolerance is what we call hypoarousal. And these are people that when they are highly stressed, they become numb, they become, detached, they become disconnected, they feel depressed, they feel helpless, they feel shut down. And this is all in the family of what we call the freeze or faint response. So your way to deal with the situation is just, to freeze, to faint, to do nothing, to be completely helpless. And when we talk about resilience, we are actually talking about taking this window of tolerance and making it bigger so that we have less chance to go to the extreme places of either hyperarousal or hypoarousal. Now, I want to say, this is very important, that resilience is not being Superman or Superwoman. There are a lot of people that think that being resilient means never crying, never being in pain, never having any difficulty, never having to ask for help. This is not resiliency. This doesn't happen. People don't deal with difficulty like that. So resiliency is not being a Superman. Resiliency is being connected with your resources and knowing the strategies that help you remain regulated or help you come back to regulation if you have lost it, okay? So let's say that I feel that I'm going into the area of the hyperarousal. I have a full kit of tools that helps me bring myself down. Or if I go into the area of hypoarousal and I feel that I'm getting detached and apathetic and so on, I have a kit of tools that helps me connect anew to the situation. And this is being resilient. Being resilient is being able to regulate myself back into my safe zone, my resilience zone. And by the way, one of our most important tools for regulation is asking for help, okay? Asking someone else to help us, to support us. This is very important. And that's why people that don't know how to ask for help or for some reason are ashamed to ask for help because they think asking for help is weakness, their resiliency is lower than people who are more outgoing about their difficulties. Now, I want to say that from the perspective of neuroscience, resilience is a skill. Now, what do I mean when I say resilience is a skill? I mean that resilience is something that we can learn and develop. This is not an innate property that we either are born with or not, okay? Because if that was the case, then some people would be naturally resilient and they didn't need to do anything for that to happen, while other people do not have resilience or have very low resilience and they can't do anything about it, okay? This is like, the question of nature versus nurture. So resilience, of course, it is affected by genetics, and we know that some people are naturally more resilient and some people are naturally less resilient. But this is not a set point. This is a point on which I can move up and down. So if I know how to build resilience as a skill, if I know how to implement the tools that strengthen my resilience, I can move myself up. On the other hand, there are many people that are very resilient, but if they undergo too many traumatic experiences and they are unable to regulate themselves, then the resilience will actually go down, okay? So this is very plastic. We can move on this scale of resilience. And I want to show you a quote, which I love very much. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find who said this quote, but the quote goes, there's no point in sewing a parachute during free fall towards the ground. We need to sew our parachute every day so that it's always there for us in case of emergency. Now, first of all, I think that I have a mistake here because I wrote sew as sewing oats and not as sewing a parachute. Is that true? Or is that written the same way? Like, is it S-O-W?
S-E-W. You need
like when you saw a shirt or... Yeah, it's a grammatical error.
When you write it in the first line, sewing, that's spelled correctly, but in the third line down with the O, that should be an E.
That should be an E, so I need to fix it. Now I'm looking at it and say, oh, we're going to sew some oats. No, so I meant sewing our parachute. What this actually says is that resilience is something that you have to work at. You cannot expect it to develop on its own. You have to work at it and you have to maintain it. And it's very important to build resilience in routine times so that when you are in a crisis, this toolkit is already there for you, because it's very hard to develop resilience when you are deep inside the crisis. Now, it's true that many people grow out of a crisis. Many people develop out of a crisis, but this feeling of growing or development, it comes after the crisis is over. When you're acutely in the crisis, you do not have any resources to grow your resilience, because all your resources are aimed at survival. Okay, so this is kind of like we know that we have to go to the gym on a regular basis or do physical activity on a regular basis. We need to understand that we also need to nurture our resilience on a regular basis by using a lot of exercises, which I will talk about in a little bit. And just to say, I already talked a little bit about the plasticity of the resilience axis. So I can say confidently that resilience is a skill, because resilience is generated by the brain. The feeling that I'm resilient is dependent on different brain systems, and the brain is plastic. The brain is always changing due to my experiences and due to training and learning. And so if I know that I can change my brain, then I know that I can change properties such as resilience. Okay, so I will just give you two quick examples. Just talk about two brain circuits that are related to stress management. And we know that these brain circuits are plastic. We can teach them to be more active or less active. So here we see the anatomical connections between two brain areas. One of them is the prefrontal cortex. I talked about it at the beginning. This is the frontal part of the cortex, the thinking brain, the planning brain, the deciding brain. This is an area of regulation. Okay, this is an area of regulation. And the second area here is the amygdala, which is a very important part of our emotional neural networks. And the amygdala, one of its most important jobs is to recognize danger. And when the amygdala recognizes danger, it starts the stress response that we talked about. Now, we know that the prefrontal cortex is regulating and inhibiting the amygdala. So this is actually a system that helps us control the activity of the amygdala, and it helps us to regulate stress. And we know that this is a plastic brain system, and the more we practice resilience, the more these connections grow and develop. And the more they grow and develop, then we become more resilient. And I just want to say that this system, this connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, it takes it a long time to develop fully, about 20 to 25 years. And these are very important years in which to practice resilience. Resilience is something that needs to be practiced from a very young age, because when we start to practice resilience at a young age, then we are directly influencing this network and making sure that it develops properly. The second circuit, I already mentioned, the stress axis, the connection between the brain and the adrenal gland. And this system also is a plastic system. And we know that as people learn to be more regulated, and as people learn to regulate their stress levels, then this stress axis becomes less active. So the stress responses are lowered and they are shortened. And basically it means that the person can deal with stress in a better way. Okay, and there are many studies from neuroscience and psychology that show changes in the systems due to resiliency training, or as I said, it can go the opposite way. It can go in a bad way, in which the prefrontal cortex is not so good at inhibiting the amygdala, or the stress axis becomes hyperactive. Like just maybe one example, we know that children that are exposed to trauma at a very young age, eventually they will develop a more active stress axis. And they will be more prone to developing depression and anxiety because of this, okay? On the other hand, if we give them interventions that help them learn to regulate themselves and their resiliency goes up, then we can prevent this from happening. So these are learning systems, and they need to get a lot of chances to practice. So what can we do in times of crisis? What strategies and what tools do we have that help us develop our resilience? I will talk about a few main areas, and then I will give a little bit more details about each of these areas. So the first area goes to working with our inner container, with our inner world. And this is the area of normalizing experience and behavior and recalling our inner strengths, okay? I will detail soon what this means, but normalizing our experiences during stress, normalizing our behavior during stress, and staying connected with the things that help us deal with challenges, okay? Our inner strength or strength that we take from the outside, from other people, and so on. The second area, which I will talk about a little bit, is human connection and being able to find safe spaces. The third area I will talk about is moments of grounding, regulating our attention in order to regulate emotions and stress responses. And the last area is creating supportive daily routines and being proactive in the situation. Now, I just want to say, before I go on to detailing a little bit, I want to say something important. Even though I tell people what we are experiencing now is our normal reactions to an abnormal situation, there comes a point when the reactions might become too extreme, and they might start harming us psychologically and physiologically. So it's very important to stay in touch with ourselves from a place that knows to recognize when we have to go to professional help. So it is natural for us in this time to have anxiety and maybe some depression and these unpleasant thoughts going around in our minds. Again, that's normal. But if I find that this has become my whole reality and all day long I'm anxious and I'm worrying and I can't do anything else, then I have to ask myself, do I need professional help? And in this case, it's going for people that are experienced, I'm talking about psychotherapy or psychiatric treatment for anxiety, for trauma, for depression. And this is important because indeed we are in 2023, but there is still a lot of stigma around psychological and psychiatric treatments. But sometimes it is necessary, and it can help you find your way back to a more centered location, okay? So please don't be shy about that. And if you think that you or someone that you love need professional help, there are a lot of places you can go. And I know there are a lot of therapists now that, due to the situation, they give pro bono help or help in a very symbolic fee, because it is obvious that, you know, there is a need for it. So having said that, we're going to start to detail a little bit about each of these areas. So we're starting with normalizing experience and behavior and recalling our inner strengths. Now, normalizing experience and behavior means helping people understand that, again, that what they're experiencing now, it can be scary, it can be very uncharacteristic of them, but it's okay. Okay, so that they don't think that they are going crazy, so they don't think that there is something wrong with them, but to understand that all these behaviors, again, they are related to the stress response, they are related to our brain's way of coping with uncertainty and with the feeling of danger. And you can normalize experience, first of all, by sharing and dialogue. People find that when they start talking to other people, suddenly they understand that all these experiences, they're not unique to them, but they are universal human experiences in the face of adversity. So sharing and dialogue can create this normalizing of experience and behavior. Conveying these messages in conversation to other people. Yeah, so like I'm talking to you, you can talk to other people if you have children, if you have other members of the family and friends, and they come to you and they say, listen, I don't know what's going on. I think I'm going crazy. I'm having these thoughts and these emotions. Then talk to them about it. Yeah, tell them what I told you. Helping to realize that something is triggering us now and that it's okay. I'm saying this in response to many people telling me that they will just spontaneously burst out crying in the middle of the day. And again, just to understand that you know, we were exposed and still are exposed to horrific stories which trigger in us, you know, unpleasant emotions and can lead us to crying. And that's okay. Sometimes, you know, we have to let go. We have to allow ourselves to sort of decompress by crying, even by doing maybe things that are can be a little bit bizarre, but if they help us to relax, then that's fine. Practicing gratitude. There are a lot of exercises in which people learn to pay attention to the good things in their life and to say thank you about these good things. This connects to recalling our inner strength. A lot of times in crisis, we tend to forget that we have a lot of inner strength and that we have a lot of things that can help us overcome adversity. And we need to practice. We need to help our brains pay attention not only to the bad things, but also to the good things. And this creates positive emotions and builds resilience. And we have to be able to answer this question, what usually helps me and what will help me right now? So again, this is being connected to our resiliency toolkit and knowing which tool is the most beneficial for me at the moment. So at the moment, do I need to do a breathing exercise? Maybe it will be better if I go running or swimming. Maybe I need to sit down for a cup of coffee. Maybe I need to talk to a good friend, okay? So knowing which strategy for regulation to choose according to the situation, this is very important. Okay, human connection and safe spaces. Here, I don't have to explain too much because we all know that one of the things that helps us to cope and comforts us is the human connection in our life. Again, with family, with friends, with colleagues, with pets, whoever it is. Looking for comforting touch, yeah, hugging, kissing, of course, consensually. Looking for support from friends, from family, from counselors. Our social world is a kind of safety net for us. It gives the brain a sense of protection. It gives the brain a sense of safety. So in times of trouble, one of the things that helps us most and raises our resiliency is knowing that we have someone in our lives that can help us and support us and knowing how to ask for that help. Other than that, we can surround ourselves with stimuli that feel like home, again, that give us a feeling of safety and certainty, favorite food, a cozy space that I like, familiar people, beloved games, hobbies, okay? So create some kind of atmosphere that tells our brain that things are okay. And trying to maintain a daily routine. Now, it doesn't have to be like the routine that we have when times are normal. It can be, as I said before, an emergency routine, but yes, to keep it some sort of routine, to keep a regular schedule as much as possible. Again, that conveys to our brain that things are okay, that things are safe, that things are predictable. Okay, so this is important. Moments of grounding, regulating attention. Attention is a very important tool in building resilience because where our attention goes will affect our emotions and our thoughts. And as I said before, our brains like to pay attention to things that worry us, that scare us, that make us anxious. And we need to teach our attention sometimes, not all the time, of course, but sometimes to go to the good things in our lives, okay? So when we are feeling overwhelmed, when we are overcome with a lot of negative thoughts, we can do all kinds of exercises that return our attention to the body and to sensations. As I said before, we have breathing exercises. There's a very good mindfulness exercise called body scan, muscle relaxation exercises. They're very good for helping us bringing the attention back to the body in order to regulate ourselves. Something else which is important, not treating thoughts as reality. We have a lot of thoughts every day. Most of them are stories that we tell ourselves and are not real. But sometimes we think that these thoughts are real and they start to activate us. So when we have this catastrophic thinking, all is lost, the state of Israel is over, everything is finished, and so on and so forth, we have to be able to stop for a minute and question these thoughts and remember that they are not a reality. They are one possible reality of many, many realities that might happen in the future. And this also helps us to maintain hope. Hope is very important in times of crisis. Body relaxation, I talked about it, and again, focusing on my resources and strengths. Last thing, creating supportive daily routines and being proactive. So all the important things that we have to do, we have to keep on doing them. Sport, exercise, listening to favorite music, games, hobbies, leisure activities, yeah? Allow ourselves this time to decompress and to relax. Rest, relaxation, exposure to nature. Very important to regulate emotions. And the proactive part helps us feel less helpless, okay? It helps us feel agency. It helps us feel autonomy. It helps us feel that we can direct our lives and we are not like leaves blowing in the wind. So volunteering, contributing, taking responsibility for someone else. So if you see someone that is having difficulties, be like sort of a mentor and help him. Of course, each of us in our own way and according to our abilities. Sometimes the little things will do the trick, okay? So we don't have to start a huge project of, you know, raising funds for IDF soldiers. It's enough to help the people around us, and there are a lot of opportunities today to help. There are a lot of volunteer organizations. So this is very good for us as well. And I think we see now this amazing volunteering spirit, which we haven't seen in a long, long time. And it comes from a genuine desire to help, but also from the understanding that when I help someone else, I also help myself. And last thing, and very important thing, reducing media consumption, okay? Again, a lot of us find it hard not to watch the news all day long. And again, this is our brain's way of seeking certainty, of wanting to know what is happening and what is going to happen. But this doesn't do us good. When we are exposed again and again and again to the terrible stories and events, it raises negative thoughts, it raises negative emotions, and in very extreme cases, it can even become a traumatic experience by proxy. Today, we know that people can develop post-traumatic stress disorder by proxy, which means that they themselves have not experienced trauma, but they have watched someone else exposed to trauma, and they can develop post-traumatic disorder. So I'm not saying, you know, be completely disconnected from what is happening, but know how to למנן, how to, איך אומרים מינון באנגלית?
Dose.
In good measure. In good measure.
Yeah, a good measure, okay? So don't go overboard, don't sit all day long in front of the TV, and I do implore you, don't watch the horror movies. I'm talking about these clips of things that happened on the 7th of October. I don't think it's doing anyone any good, okay? Of course, for children, even more important. Okay, so I have been talking for 1 hour and 5 minutes, and I think it's time for me to stop. Before I stop, I want to I want to offer you a gratitude exercise that you can do daily. And this exercise has been shown to build resilience and nurture positive emotions. I'm going to go out, come out of the share so that I can see you. Yeah. So what is this gratitude exercise? It's a very simple exercise. You do it either at the beginning of the day when you wake up or at night before you go to sleep. And for this exercise, you need like a notebook or a diary and something to write. Don't do it in your phones, okay? There is something to the quality of writing that makes this exercise stronger. And what you do is the next thing. You open the notebook and you think about 3 things in your life that you are grateful for. And they can be little things like, I have an orange tree, which I'm actually looking at right now, and I see that my orange tree has produced an orange. And so tomorrow I can go and pick that orange and eat it. I'm grateful for that, yeah? It can be big things. I have an amazing husband, which is, you know, which supports me, and we have an amazing relationship. This is a big thing. I'm very grateful for it, okay? I have a great family. I have a job that I enjoy, and so on and so forth. So you pick 3 things, you write them down, and then you read them, and you read them very carefully, paying attention, not doing anything else, only reading them. And then you close your eyes and you try to feel, you try to notice what this does to your body, okay? What kinds of emotions are coming up? What kinds of sensations are coming up when you are thinking about these things that you're grateful for? And mostly it will bring up positive emotions and positive sensations. And this is brain training. This is training our brain to pay attention to the strengths and to the good things in our lives. And as I said, there is a lot of research that shows that people that do this exercise on a daily basis, the resilience goes up, they report more positive emotions, more positive sensations, they are healthier. So this is important, again, because our brain really likes to deal with the bad stuff, and it forgets sometimes that there's also a lot of good in the world. So we need to be reminded of that, or help our brain remember that. So that's it. That's what I had to say. So now, if you have any questions, any thoughts, I'm here for you.
Well, I just want to say it was very interesting and mind stimulating, if you put it that way. So thank you for this wonderful lecture.
Yeah, thank you. It was really, really great.
Thank you for listening. It's a privilege for me, really. As I said, I'm very grateful for doing something that I like and something meaningful. And during these times, I really feel that this knowledge about the brain, it's so important because it helps people, you know, knowledge brings power. Knowledge gives you a sense of control, a sense of understanding. And when I talk to people about the brain, they start understanding all kinds of things, and it relaxes them. It makes them understand all these universal human experiences and their biological basis. And I think it does a lot of good. So thank you for your attention. And I will send
Can I ask a
Jonathan.
question?
Sorry?
Could I ask a question?
Sure, happily.
Do you know of any specific programs designed for children?
Yes, I do. In Hebrew, though, not in English. So there is, yeah.
I know of one in English.
Okay, so
it's called Smiling Mind. Have you heard of it? It's actually sounds like everything that you were saying before.
Yeah,
it's
it
a
sounds
free
like
app.
something
Yeah.
mindfulness related.
It's a really great app. It's got an Australian accent, but you can have like a man or a female voice. It's called Smiling Mind. And they actually have it for adults and kids, and it breaks it up into different age levels. And there's all these great mindfulness activities and meditations. So that's one that I know in English.
Great. So that's a very important resource. Also, I want to tell you there is an organization called Sfat HaKeshev, I will write it in the chat so that you can look it up in Google. שפת הקשב, the language of attention, is actually a mindfulness program for kids, which was developed here in Israel. And they have a really good website. And on the website, they have a lot of exercises specifically for kids and teenagers. And they also have courses, training courses for parents, for children. So that's a resource that you can use. Okay, and all their teachers are specifically trained to work with the children and teenagers.
Thank you.
They also work in schools like us. Yeah.
I was just going to mention, I stopped with the news a little bit ago when 3 different people told me about a WhatsApp group that has very summarized, concise summaries of the news without pictures and links. And I needed to hear about it 3 times till I joined. So I wanted to mention it to everyone here. Lokchim achrayut. I don't think it has anything to do with the war, but it's obviously finding more users because of the war.
Yeah. Oh, it's good to know. Okay,
Thank
so
you
I
so
think
much.
thank you. So I think we will finish here. I will send Jonathan the link to the lecture. And again, please feel free to pass it on to whomever you please.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.